It's time for game night. A look at all of the high school football games set for this weekend across the central Susquehanna Valley.
Hello and welcome to week 5 of our Game Night High School Football Podcast. I'm Daily Item Sports Editor Kurt Ritzman. I'm joined by Todd Hummel as always.
We're only going to be halfway through the season at the end of this week.
I know we are.
Holy cow.
Our podcast is brought to you by Bruiser Sports Grill at 839 West Water Street in Cole Township. And I've got some other news. We're on iTunes now.
Oh, cool.
So if you want to find us on iTunes, just go to the Apple Podcasting app and search Game Night High School Football Podcast. You should be able to find it easily from that. Then you can subscribe and you can get the podcast right to you every week through the app.
Ooh,
yeah,
that's exciting.
I know. You can download and listen on your commute, whatever you want.
So I can't do it.
Well, do it on your Mac at work.
There you go.
So let's look back at week 4. What stuck out to you from last week?
It seems so long ago.
I know it does.
I was pretty impressed with Mount Carmel over Jersey Shore. They seem to have a much improved passing game, which will probably help a lot this week when they go to Ashland. Trying to think what else. Danville was impressive again against against Mifflinburg.
How about Carson Persing, freshman, 7 catches, 189 yards, 4 touchdowns.
That seems to be a decent night. And it's funny, he doesn't. I saw some of the highlights on TV, and he's obviously not quite as tall as Peyton, but he's number 17 like his older brother Peyton Persing, and he's putting together a nice little receiving season too. That should put him in the lead. I didn't actually look at the leaders yet, but that should put him in the lead in receiving in the area because Riley Dahlberg only had, I think, 2 catches for 30 yards, and it was much closer than 160 yards for first place. And we talked a lot about what's going on at Danville, and I guess since we did the last podcast, more weird things have happened. They accepted Jim Kaiser's resignation. There was also some drama at the school board meeting, but these kids keep moving on. They're one play away from still being undefeated. It's interesting the way these co-coaches have really kept them focused on the task at hand, and it's going to be. I'd like to see how that goes the rest of the season. Southern has won the most regular season games in a row in the state of Pennsylvania now. That sticks out from last season, and that didn't take long to happen.
No.
And
outscored their opponents 222-0 through 4 games.
That seems to be good. That's like Carson Persing's name. Yes. Is that okay? It seems good. And that's the other big news this week so far is they've picked up a new opponent. They're going to drop Shikellamy and pick up Wyoming area, and Shikellamy going to play Holy Redeemer. Southern's going to go up to Wyoming area. I don't think we're sure yet. We actually haven't discussed it yet.
I have not heard where Schick and Holy Redeemer will play. I only heard the rumors from you.
Well, I was going to say they're talking about Berwick, Central, maybe King's College, just someplace in between the play, because Holy Redeemer I think plays at Wilkes-Barre Memorial Stadium, and I don't think it's available that Friday night. So I think that's one of the reasons they're looking for someplace to play, and they don't want to come all the way down to Sunbury right now, I guess.
I liked your idea.
Oh.
more schedule changing and put Midwest and Schick together.
Yeah, I just had the idea that Athens and Holy Redeemer are a little closer than Schick and Midwest, so maybe we could flip those around. And Schick and Midwest have never played, and just things that pop into my head that probably will never happen. But I think next year when Midwest picks up Selinsgrove and Schick next year during the regular season, so we will get that game, just probably not this year.
Other big news, I don't know if you heard, apparently Midwest's grant money from the NFL is now over. So you can read that story on the front page of Thursday's Daily Item.
Oh, geez.
And Hunter Wolfley had another big game for them last week.
Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way.
On the field, he's up to 10 touchdowns now. He averaged almost 30 yards per touch, six touches between rushing and catching, 177 yards and 3 more touchdowns for him.
Yeah, he's probably the most improved, I think without a doubt the most improved player in the area, and they've been bigger test this week. Shenandoah has last week's opponent has really struggled over the last couple of years, and they really couldn't run the ball against the Mustangs and never really got anything started offensively. And once this stretch of games, it was Jim Thorpe this week, and I think Penns Valley soon, who's also, pretty darn good. We're going to get a truer test of, how good this Midwest team is.
Okay, that's our look at last week's games. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, Bruiser Sports Grill, and then we'll be back to look at the Friday's games.
GDK Development of Shamokin is a proud supporter of all local and youth sports. The Welsh family has been in business for 37 years and thanks you for supporting them and their local businesses, including Bruiser Sports Grill in Cole Township and the Elysburg and Sunbury Burger King restaurants. Again, thank you for 37 years of support and good luck area athletes and teams this sports season from the Welsh family and GDK Development of Shamokin.
Let's start with a Hack 1 game pitting 2-2 Shamokin at 2-2 Lewisburg. And these are two teams I don't really have much of a sense of either of them, but I think it could be a good game on Friday night.
Shamokin has had, Shamokin's two losses were to North Schuylkill and Southern Columbia, and they were never in either game. So, it's hard to get a read against a decent team, which Lewisburg is obviously, and what Lewisburg wants to do is run Max Moyers, and Ethan Dominic has become a weapon for them this season. This is a tough one to get a read on because last year when they played, Shamokin was able to get this one uncharacteristically. Nick Shedleski threw 2 interceptions that I think were returned for touchdowns in the first quarter of that game, and Lewisburg was quickly behind the 8 ball in that one. I don't be really surprised if that would happen again. I think looking at this slated games, this might be the toughest one to decide who might win this one this week, just because they're so evenly matched, and that Lewisburg's 2 losses are to Selinsgrove and Mount Carmel, and I think Lewisburg gets this one just because they were able to do some good things against Mount Carmel before. Turnovers is what really hurt them in that game. It's not like Mount Carmel completely shut them down. So I just think Shamokin, like you said, it's kind of hard to get a read on them just because they really haven't. They played Milton, who they handled, and then they lost to North Schuylkill, and then they really muddled through that Central Mountain game up at Central Mountain.
Well, that in their defense, that's a really long road trip, but still 12-7 with a late touchdown to win.
Yeah, they needed a defense touchdown. They really haven't.
You don't feel good about that.
They haven't, other than that Milton game, they really haven't gotten their running game untracked, and that's going to be something to keep an eye out in this one. Like I said, I think the Green Dragons get this one, but this is probably the best and closest game of the week.
The game that I'm most interested in is where I'm sending you on Friday night. 2-2 Warrior Run at 3-1 Mifflinburg. Both these teams clearly have made strides this season, and I think this game could go a long way to seeing who's going to take that next step that we've been waiting for one of them to do for a year and a half now.
I was going to say, that seems to be like we've had this conversation before. I made the mistake of saying that the other one was the most interesting.
No, but they're both interesting.
But the Warrior Run last week really never got anything going offensively against Montoursville, but that's a pretty impressive defensive performance. Yeah. Mifflinburg was really one-dimensional last week against Danville. They couldn't get their passing game going, and that really cost them in that game. Mason Breed had 130 yards, but I think they only had 12 yards passing in that game. So I think I think that's something to look for this week, is just trying to get, that passing game going to keep, defenses from stacking the box. And, Warrior Run after, throwing the ball around the first couple weeks for 2 weeks, the second and third week of the season, really struggled in that part of the game last week. Really didn't get anything offensively going. The only touchdown came on a Riley Dahlbert kickoff return. Obviously, Mifflinburg's going to have to be aware where Mr. Dahlbert is at all times. I think Mifflinburg wins this one. I think this one is fairly close as well. I think Mifflinburg gets, if Mifflinburg gets to 4-1, where, they're probably looking at a real good chance in the power rankings of getting a home game, but the schedule gets tougher in the second month of the season. So we'll see. I'm really interested to see, how they match up with somebody like Loyalsock. I think that's a team that they, that's probably a good measuring stick for them. A team that beat Danville, was pretty even with Danville, and I think I'd like to see that game pretty soon. And I'd like to, if Warrior Run gets that offense back on track, this one could be a high scoring game. I think Mifflinburg gets this one, but I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. You might have been right. Who knows?
They both have the potential to be good.
We'll come back on Friday night, and Midwest and Jim Thorpe will be a 2-point game.
I'm going to take the Defenders, not just to be contrary.
Yes, it is.
Well, I mean a little, but I also think they're going to win. I like what they've put together.
You're going to do some sort of weird victory dance when I get back, right?
If Warrior Run wins, no, I won't. We've another game pitting two Valley squads against each other. Probably a little less interesting on the surface. We got 0-4 Milton headed to 3-1 Danville, who has done a real good job dealing with off the field stuff as we talked about a little earlier.
And then this is obviously one of those focus games too, where Milton has really struggled this season. I don't think Danville should have many issues with them, but again, Milton's offensive line is big. It's going to be interesting to see how Danville kind of attacks that and stops that running game. Milton really didn't get much going last week. They had some running game going the second and third week of the season. Really didn't get much going against last week against Lewisburg. Struggled in the passing game. Don't know what they're doing at quarterback yet. It seems like Ethan Rowe played pretty well. I don't know if that was more of a function of the game being out of hand in the second half and he's the backup, but he had better numbers last week. But, and again, Danville has really kept focused. The co-coaches, interim co-coaches, God, that's a mouthful. Chris Coombe and Brian Raup have kept this group focused. KJ Riley has been absolutely outstanding the last 2 weeks, 16 of 18 last week.
Wow.
I think he's thrown for, 514 yards and 7 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. I remember those numbers. I added up the completions, but he's. I mean, it's obviously up over 60% the last 2 weeks, and it's funny. I was chuckling. Peyton Persing put those numbers up. Carson Persing put those numbers up. In the junior brother Ian Persing might be just as good an athlete as those two, but just kind of in a different position. And he's more of a defensive stalwart for the Ironmen. It's interesting. It's probably sad for the Shikellamy people that know that their dad was a quarterback over here at Shikellamy, and that they would certainly help the Braves these days. But yeah, I think Danville takes this one and it probably pretty easily. And Central Columbia, Montoursville up next for them, so that their slate gets tougher over the next couple weeks.
I usually save the Tri-Valley League games for last, but there's only one this week, and it's another game pitting two schools we cover against each other, so I want to talk about it now.
You lost the G.
Pitting.
You went pitting.
2-2 Line Mountain coming off a tough loss. They took a safety to punt from better field position, and then Juniata scored late to top the Eagles last week. And 2-2 Millersburg coming off their second win of the season, held off Halifax 21-19 last week.
This just goes, if Millersburg can stop the run, they hang in the game. If they can't, they won't. And it'll be interesting to see how Lime Mountain bounces back from last week, because that was a tough one. 18 points in the fourth quarter for Juniata to win. I think it was 40-33 was the final. That had to have been an awful ride home from Mifflintown last week for the Eagles. And we talked a lot about their turnover issues, and that's not what happened. They didn't turn the ball over in that game. You look at the offensive. You look at the numbers. It looks like that they should have won that one pretty easily, and it's that's really rare for that. It's really rare for them to have a defensive breakdown like that in the fourth quarter, and I'm just interested to see how they bounce back from that. I think the Eagles are probably a lot better than the Indians, and probably should roll in this one. But if there's a little bit of a hangover for a half, and Millersburg gets that confidence, I don't think Lime Mountain wants to let that happen and have Millersburg hanging in there and thinking they have a shot to win.
Yeah, this is Aaron Wright's third year, I think, at Millersburg. And every year he said once they get the first one, he thought they'd be able to get a couple more. If they finally got the first one to start this year, they already have 2 through 4 weeks of the season.
And Mike thinks that the Tri-Valley is struggling this year. I think that game's winnable. And like we said last week, that game last week was a preview of the district championship game, probably in District 3, unless Fairfield can figure out a way to get the 2 wins as well. And it was I don't know how well played game it was, but it certainly was exciting and went down to the wire.
Competitive 21-19 win for the Indians.
It's more competitive than any game I saw so far this year.
Selinsgrove's coming off a win against Shikellamy to get back to 2-2. They're headed to undefeated Berwick in a tough road test.
Yeah, in the opening, we didn't really talk a lot about the Seal Shik game, which is the game I covered last week. And, Selinsgrove didn't not get off to a great start offensively early on. I think it was drove 7-0 early, and then I think punted 3 times in a row. But late in the first half, they punted, but on that drive they had a chance for first down, and Josh Nyland had tried to make a tough catch and wasn't able to haul it in. And then later on, to cap the half, those of you that watched it on TV made an absolutely beautiful diving one-handed grab for a touchdown that ended up, it was a middle touchdown and a run of 3 straight touchdowns in like 6 minutes of game time that put the game away from Selinsgrove. And I talked to Josh and talked to Josh a little bit about that catch after the game.
I wasn't really frustrated. It was just more like going through timing, and the timing was a little off. But other than that, it was just like we worked it out as like a team. Like me and Danny communicated a little bit, and then we got back on track, and then it like paid off in the end.
You guys started off a little slow again offensively. What did with that run? Did you guys feel a little more comfortable now after this game?
I mean, it's still like Shikellami's 0-4, nothing against them or anything, but we still need to get back. We have Berwick next week and just take it a week at a time.
Was the spread something you guys saw a little bit early?
We didn't really we're not really a spread team, but we kind of worked through it and saw that it was there for this week, and just tried it out and see how things would go, and it worked out pretty well so far.
Yeah. Now going to Berwick, coached by Carm DiFrancesco. That's going to be.
Have you guys heard of him?
Yeah,
you familiar with that coach?
Because who's probably. Would you know him if you saw him?
I would not.
No, because Kurt's obviously not from around here. That's just the funny part. But talked to Carm yesterday. He's going to be the cover story taking over at Berwick. It'll be a fun little story. This is going to be, after the way Selinsgrove, had a tough time with Jersey Shore up front and Southern Columbia up front. This is a strength of that Berwick team. Believe it or not, looking at the numbers, the difference is 25 or 30 yards, but Berwick's actually given up less yards this season than Southern Columbia.
I don't believe it.
It's pretty close. Now they're actually ranked 8th in the state. There's 2 other teams in 4A ranked ahead of them in District 2 that are also undefeated. Wow. So, and I do believe they play Dallas pretty soon. So, Berwick's schedule, with Southern Columbia and Jersey Shore on that schedule, Selinsgrove's probably played a tougher schedule than the Bulldogs so far this year. And this game, this game's going to come down to if the Selinsgrove offense can move the ball in the Berwick defense and can put some points on the board. Berwick straight has been running the ball real well. I've 5 guys with at least 100 yards on the ground already this season. Wow. So that's going to be that perfect recipe. It sounds like it's going to be, if Selinsgrove can handle themselves up front, they'll be in the game. If they can't, they won't. And that's been the story of their season so far. They haven't been 8 quarters without a score, and then 37 points last week. I think they'd like to keep that momentum going. I think Berwick gets this one, but I'm interested to see how Selinsgrove responds against a tough opponent after those first 2 losses this season.
Then on the other side, Shik dropped to 0-4, headed to Jersey Shore, who is 2-2. Played really well against Selinsgrove a couple weeks ago, coming off that loss to Mount Carmel, like we said, where Mount Carmel kind of ran however much it wanted, at least early.
And it's kind of what Montoursville did them too the week before. Those 2 teams that are real tough up front. I think that's probably, it's talked a lot about this last week when we talked about Shik and Selinsgrove, and from watching them, it's evident there's obviously talent there. They they're one step away. They're 2 steps forward, 1 step back too. They'll have a 10-yard gain and then somebody will jump on the next play and stuff like that. And once that stuff gets cleaned up, the Holy Redeemer game later on in the season, Central Mountains later in the season, there's some winnable games later in the season, and this is such a tough road trip. And I really feel that one of these teams is going to, play Schick last year and see Schick's record this year and take them lightly. I don't know if it's Jersey Shore this week, but they're going to be in one of these games and maybe steal one of these games from one of these better teams. I'd feel a lot better about it if Jersey Shore was 3-1 rather than 2-2, coming off 2 straight losses. Because one thing Coach Gravich does do up there is he gets those kids quickly, gets them back on track. I think Jersey Shore gets this one, but yeah, just thinking back to that game, there was a halfback option pass from Mason Brubaker, or a double pass basically. Mason Brubaker, they tried to find Drew Balestrini down the sideline, just a half a step overthrown, wide open, just things like that. And Selinsgrove was it was 6-0 because Selinsgrove missed the extra point. Schick answered in the beginning of the second quarter, and that most of that second quarter was punts and good defensive plays. And if Schick could have figured out a way to put together a drive before Selinsgrove went on a run, probably would have been a different, a much closer second half and a much more exciting second half. But again, Jersey Shore gets this one, but this is not the 0-4 injury-ravaged Braves of a season ago. How's that?
We got Central Columbia 3-1, headed to Elysburg to take on the undefeated Tigers, who are going to win 50+0. Anything else you want to
add? If you get a chance to watch the highlights on the Twitter box of Gavin Garcia this week, watch the cut in the first touchdown. It's nuts. But yeah, it's like video game numbers sometimes. What they had, the Garcia brothers had 12 carries, I think, for almost 300 yards combined last week in the first half. They threw 3 passes, completed 3 passes to Julian. He had 3 touchdowns. And again, I don't think Shamokin's a bad football team.
No.
Just like I don't think Selinsgrove's a bad football team. It's just one of those.
The Hammond School's probably not bad.
Yeah.
Mount Carmel's not bad.
No, Mount Carmel's really good.
It doesn't matter when you play Southern this year.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think it's hard to. Those kids have been so good for so long, for these 4 years. I think it'll take distance for people to realize how good this football team is. Because I hate to say this, but I think we're used to it at this point.
Sure.
I mean, and just some of the numbers they're rolling up is just ridiculous.
Yeah, you're more surprised if they win. If they win 28-0, you're more surprised than if they win 90-0 on Friday.
Dude, if somebody only wins 20, if they only beat somebody 28-0, somebody's celebrating after a 28-0 loss.
We got Mount Carmel 3-1, headed to 3-1 North Schuylkill in a game that I think is interesting. I think the Red Tornadoes go in there and get them finally.
Finally?
I don't know when the last time was, but it's not been while I've been here, all of 3 seasons.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it has been a couple years. I guess Southern was kind of their doctorate test. This is kind of the master thesis test for them. They, by the way, I'm stealing that for my picks. Just from the little bit I've seen of North Schuylkill, and granted that was 3 weeks. It was 3 weeks ago against Loyal Sock. They really struggled with pass defense, and that's probably the biggest improvement in Mount Carmel's offense this season is their passing game. Obviously, Jack Chapman's tough, big guy. They're splitting him out wide a lot more than they're running him at tight end sometimes. Wow. Now that was more against. They did it a little bit against Lewisburg too, and that's a tough matchup on the outside for people. And they got the Noah Burkowskis and Dylan Pupos, and those kids are kind of like, I say they're interchangeable in the fact that they're kind of the same player. The short, speedy receiver that can exploit teams down the field, and that they like to give in that end around. Plus, last year Shane Winder also proved what kind of athlete he is. So they kind of have all kinds of weapons, and they're getting them more involved in the passing game than they have in the past. And I think it's kind of I think Coach Derrick kind of realized that they kind of need this for the Southern Columbias and the North Schuylkills of the world, where they can't. And obviously, I think last week against Jersey Shore that Reisinger's running has improved too. Get a long touchdown run and then another 50-some yarder or 40-some yarder to set up another touchdown, I think I read. So, Yeah, I not as confident as you. I think, the Spartans team that offensive line has played real well, except for, why I'm missing, who is, probably, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a why I'm missing Montoursville North Schuylkill game in 6-8 weeks.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I think Mount Carmel, I think North Schuylkill gets this one, but I'm interested to see. Again, this is another one where, this is kind of a measuring stick game for Mount Carmel, because there's not a lot of teams that are going to give Mount Carmel a lot of problems this season either, despite again what Southern Columbia was able to do.
Then our last game of the week, we touched on earlier. 2-2 Midwest hosts undefeated Jim Thorpe. Probably a little bit of a mismatch for the Mustangs.
Yeah, right now, the Olympians, I think it was 76-0 at the half with Kutztown, who is struggling. They just canceled the game at the half. They didn't play the second half. I saw the halftime score and then never saw the final, and then finally saw that they just decided not to play the second half. Kutztown's down to like 18 players, I think.
Wow.
Excuse me. But, just watching the Midwest 2 weeks ago against Springfield Township, Hunter Wolfley is going to give Jim Thorpe's problems. It's just, can they get something consistently going offensively? And on the same token, they really struggled defensively in the second half 2 weeks ago against Blue Mountain. I think just from reading stuff down in the area, people think Jim Thorpe is better than Blue Mountain.
Wow.
So, so I think Midwest hangs in for a half, but I think Jim Thorpe's offense is probably just too much for them. If Midwest's defense can play like it did last week, and they're going to have to contain the running game, I should know these names, Jim Thorpe names. They're some of the same names from last year, but the quarterback's pretty good too. They're a little more balanced. I know they relied on their running back a lot last year, but it seems to be they're a touch more balanced just from watching the highlights so far this season on TV. So, yeah, I think Jim Thorpe gets this one, and 1+ for Midwest. That is an awful road trip for Jim Thorpe, as Midwest found out when they went down there last year. So, yeah, that's a long bus ride from Carbon County to the west end of Snyder County. So yeah, Jim Thorpe gets that one, but these next couple of weeks are going to be a test for Midwest between Jim Thorpe and Penns Valley.
Sure. All right, that's our look at this week's games. Make sure to pick up our game night with Todd's cover story on Berwick coach Carm DiFrancesco. Plus, I wasn't sure if it was or
Oh.
Carm DiFrancesca. I mean, that could be, but it's not. It's DiFrancesco. So make sure you guys pick that up. Plus, we'll have game previews, his column, and picks. Friday night, follow along, dailyitem.com for our live scoreboard and live blog. Then Saturday, we'll have full coverage of the games. Monday, we'll have the notebook with interesting tidbits that didn't make it in Saturday's paper. And then we'll be back here next week to look at week 6.
That's like the best you Jim that out of
I
here.
know.
No pauses. Bam.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you.
See ya.
GDK Development of Shamokin is a proud supporter of all local and youth sports. The Welsh family has been in business for 37 years and thanks you for supporting them and their local businesses, including Bruiser Sports Grill in Cole Township and the Elysburg and Sunbury Burger King restaurants. Again, thank you for 37 years of support and good luck area athletes and teams this sports season from the Welsh family and GDK Development of Shamokin.